Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Adam Thompson Show. Cutting edge.
He just told you to shut the f*** up.
No holds barred.
Thanks for not calling me a liar, son of a...
The latest trending topics, legal cases, and social issues. In-your-face commentary on all subjects. Adam Thompson.
You can't handle the truth!
Adam Thompson brings his 25-year experience as a high-profile criminal and civil trial lawyer and gritty New York street smarts and attitude to the studio. Real unbiased talk.
Those who want respect, give respect.
You never know what he'll say next. This is the Adam Thompson Show. Here's your host, Adam Thompson.
Good evening, everybody. This is Adam Thompson. Thanks for being here, as always, every Thursday at 9 o'clock on Blog Talk Radio, The Adam Thompson Show. I want to thank you because there's a lot going on in the world right now. And I got to tell you, we're at some crossroads right now. We got some big decisions coming up. You know, I usually do the opening of the show. Oh, thanks for being here. No hold barred talk. You know, listen, let's just cut to the chase on important stuff, you know. Let's put all the radio and TV and media rhetoric behind and all the promoting and all the pushing and getting people jazzed up for what's coming. What's really important is what we have to say. What's the context of what we're talking about? What's the content? Let's put it all out there. Let's make it make sense and put it together. This is about educating people and discussing what's important. You know, I usually start off the shows, I do a rant, and then I go into the news flash, and let's see what's going on in the news. Let's talk about Zimmerman again, that idiot who keeps getting picked up and arrested on things. Or let's talk about Lamar Odom, who's making tens of millions of dollars playing basketball, and he's using drugs, whatever it is, coke, hitting the pipe, whatever they're saying he's doing, and what are the Kardashians saying about it, and they'll probably use it for the next 5 episodes on their show and milk it, make money on it and profit. You know, all that stuff is nice entertainment news. Who cares? Really, who cares? Do you guys out there really care about that? You know, when you go online and you see these blogs and you see what's going on and you read about things that are in the news, it's always nonsense like this. You know, it's good, you know, conversation around the, you know, the water cooler or when you're hanging out in a bar and you're doing whatever you're doing. You know, people want to keep it light. You talk about nonsensical stuff like this. But should we be caring about the Kardashians? Should we keep worrying about what's going on with George Zimmerman and his divorce with his wife? Because there's a million people getting divorced. Why do we keep talking about them? Why are these people on the headlines of the news? That if you go online and you look at the Huffington Post or you click Google and the trending leading stories, is this nonsense? Does everybody realize right now we're about to go into another war? We're about to go into Syria. And every day, all they're doing in Washington, D.C. is debating back and forth, should we go in or should we not go in? Do we need to just act unilaterally and go in there and drop some bombs and start, you know, stepping in the Middle East once again? Or should we just sit back? And should we wait and let's see if there's going to be consensus among our allies in the UN? And we go there and we take a vote and see what they want to do. You know, we're going to get involved, use the military, use the brute force, or, you know, let's try something more diplomatic. Do we do sanctions again? Is sanctions going to work there? But what's the big questions? You know, we talk about this all the time, and I brought this up week after week. I said from the get-go, I don't think we belong in Syria. And why? Because really, whatever's going on there, it's a civil war. Do we really care about what's going on with either side in that civil war? Is our battle to get involved in? Do we have a dog in that fight? Are we going to just send over our troops at some point again? Because we always say we're not. And it always starts off with an air attack because we have superior air capabilities in all these other nations. And we just start dropping bombs and taking people out and everything else. But it always leads to some boots on the ground and some kind of force being sent in. Do we really need to be sending our kids over there to get killed? But even without that, do we need to be spending the millions and millions of dollars that we're pouring into this to, again, step into another battle to where we questionably belong? And you hear the arguments from both sides. You know what? We should get involved in this because we can't send a message to the people that are out there like Assad, who's using poison gas and killing people, and the people in Iran that are watching this to see if we allow him to use weapons of mass destruction because it'll make them more emboldened, and then they'll go out and they will get nuclear capabilities, and then they'll use a nuke. You know, there's that camp of arguments going on out there. But, you know, the point is, if you're going to get involved in a situation, you got to send a clear message and you got to do it decisively. When you're going back and forth like what's going on right now, and one day we're saying if you step over this red line, we're we're attacking, and then you don't do anything, well, then you lose credibility, and you also look weak. And then when you say, I'm going to hold a conference to discuss this, or hold a national televised press conference, and you say you're going to go into it, and you still do nothing, and then you pull back and you say, well, maybe now we'll just take it to a vote. And then you have people who are supposed to be your aides, like the Secretary of State, Kerry, and he's saying, off-the-cuff remarks, well, maybe we shouldn't go in there. Maybe what we should do is just try to see if they'll turn over their chemical weapons, and we'll be in control of them. And a passing remark now turns into maybe that's really the policy behind closed doors, and now is that really what Obama wants to do? And then we have the Russian President Putin jumping all over that and now saying that that's really a Russian idea, and he thinks that everyone should go in there and just take the chemical weapons back if Assad will do that, which now gives the U.S. a backdoor to slide out of even going in to do any military strike at all. But what this all shows is we're talking about going to war, folks, where people die. You know, if we drop bombs there, we're killing tens of thousands of innocent people, potentially, that could be in that hit zone. And you got to take human life very precious, and you got to make big decisions if you're going to do something like that. You just don't haphazardly make a decision to go in there and do that. And if that's going to be the decision and the course you're going to do, discounting the lives that you're going to take potentially there, you're going to be taking the lives of our own people or of allied forces that are going there with us. And you better have a good plan. A plan not only what you're going to do when you get in there, once you're in, how do you follow up? And how do you keep peace and stability once you're in there to resolve it? Do you know who's going to be replacing Assad if you get him out? Because that should be your game plan. You got to know exactly what you're doing. You got to have an exit strategy. You got to know once you're in there and you chop the head off the monster, who's going to replace the monster? A bigger monster? Or hopefully someone that can walk with us? You know? It's something that you have to think about. And I can tell you, I know people that have been over in Iraq. And they've been there and they've done multiple tours. Been there, sent back, been there, sent back, been there, sent back. And a lot of people I talked to that I know went over there, one of the big questions they always asked is, and said, why were we there? I mean, everyone thought we knew why we were there, to liberate, to help, knock out that government. But really, what's the reason we were there? And when you have the military that is there fighting for us, and our soldiers on the ground are kind of confused or unsure why they're there, or question why we're there, you have to start asking yourself, then, does this make sense? Do we need to be there? Because if you're going to fight something, you have to believe in what you're fighting for. And I look around the country and I see how the economic collapse is happening all around us. People are fighting to get a higher minimum wage. People don't even know if they're able to make a mortgage payment. People don't know how they're paying for school. People don't know how they're paying for health care. People don't know if they could even get a job. We're driving on highways that are broken up and totally dilapidated. Bridges are falling apart. We're seeing an internal destruction of our own country that needs help. So how are we fighting battles, again, halfway across the globe, that we have no real dog in the fight when we have to take care of home base here, when there's so much to do here? Why? Education needs to get improved. We need to hire more teachers, better teachers. We need to do all of this, and it's not getting done. But yet, we're lining up the war machine to get going again and to fight another war. You're listening to the Adam Thompson Show here on Blog Talk Radio. I want you to visit my site because it's tons of good stuff on it, www.attorneyadamthompson.com. You'll get our links there to our Facebook page with tons of video clips in my blog where we discuss these exact things. Read what your fellow citizens out there and other viewers are thinking on these exact things. We have a very, very special guest tonight who I wanted to have on in particular because of this debacle of what's going on with Syria right now. And I really can't think of anybody that has his background and expertise that's out there who really could give us the real inside scoop about really what's going on and give us some insight. And I'm talking about Michael Scheuer, who for over 20 years, he's a CIA veteran. And in fact, from 1996 to 1999, he served as the chief of the bin Laden unit that was assigned to track down Osama bin Laden as part of our counterterrorism center and take him out. He was the guy, find him, and let's get him. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But he's done so much. He has numerous books out there, Through Our Enemy's Eyes, There's just so many. Marching Towards Hell. You can look him up, Google him. He's all over the place. He's one of the most regarded experts in this area, and I want to bring him on right now. Michael, thank you for joining the show tonight.
No, sir. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure because, I try to make my show about getting ideas out there from all points of view to educate our audience about what's going on. And I got to tell you, this whole mess of what's going on with Syria has me scared to death because after what we've been going through the past couple of decades, with going into Iraq, which really seemed to produce nothing, and then going into Afghanistan, which seemed to produce nothing, and we keep taking on these battles in the Middle East, and now here it is knocking on the door again. I don't want to leave out Libya, but now we're knocking on the door again with Syria. And I don't see any dog we have in this fight because Assad, is Assad. We don't have to say much about him, and we know what he's capable of doing and what he's done, and he's fighting probably people who are just as bad. So, regardless of who comes out on top, is there really any winner that's going to help us in our national security? So let me just pose that question to you. Should we be in Syria, yes or no?
No. There's no U.S. interest at risk here. Obama has, again, applied his ideology more than any kind of common sense. He wants to go to the rescue of an idea of disarmament. But there's no U.S. interest there. In fact, from a very cynical or a very callous point of view, everyone that we want dead are being killed in Syria, and we haven't had to do a thing. The Syrians, the Iranians, and Hezbollah are killing the Al-Qaeda guys, and Al-Qaeda is killing them. There's just no reason for us to get involved at all.
Well, that's what's so confusing, because when I looked at this and really analyzed it, if we're going to get involved in wars, I think it should be where it directly affects our national security and or our allies that also could impact our national security. And listen, what's going on in Syria, we have no ties to them. So if we're going to be brutally honest, people are so worried about being politically correct and what people are going to say about stuff, but if we're going to be brutally honest, we really shouldn't have any interest what goes on in there. Unless we're just going to say from a purely humanitarian point of view, we don't want to see people slaughtered and we don't want to see weapons of mass destruction used against people. We don't want to have a repeat of what happened back with, in the days of the Nazis where millions died and people, stood by and did nothing. But at the same time, the state that our country is in and how the economy is collapsing, do we really need to spend trillions of dollars again where, as you just said, both sides don't do anything to help us? Whichever side prevails in this case is going to actually end up still being an adversary or an enemy. I mean, which side do you actually think is worse if you had to make a decision?
Well, I think what is not talked about in the American media, and certainly by this president and his advisors, is the threat from the Sunni Islamists, which has grown remarkably since 2001. If you looked at a map, for example, in 2001, the threat from Al-Qaeda and its allies would have been primarily in Afghanistan and a little bit in Yemen and Pakistan. Today it's across North Africa, it's in Iraq, it's in Afghanistan. We're about to give Afghanistan back to them. It's in about a third of Pakistan. It's in Yemen. That's the real war. Obama and Bush both chose not to win in Afghanistan. And so we have another war coming. I think it's very important not to get involved in something that's none of our business because we still have a war to fight that this president and the last one have lost.
And why is that important? Why do we need to resolve that?
Because they're going to keep coming at us as long as we continue to intervene in their world. We still are preached to by Obama, by John McCain, by Lindsey Graham, by both parties and all of the media that we're being attacked because they hate our liberties and they hate our freedom and they hate gender equality. What they hate is what we're up to, our support for the Israelis, our presence on the Arab Peninsula, our connivance in overthrowing a fairly elected government in Egypt, our support for the Saudi tyranny. And as long as we do not change our foreign policy, we are going to have to fight to survive. And we're going to end up fighting in this country.
Well, let me ask you, if in your opinion, you think if we pulled out, let's suppose just tomorrow, we really said, you know what, we don't have any dogs in this fight here at all, and we just say, let's pull out of Afghanistan, let's pull out of Iraq, let's just leave this mess alone, let's go in a little bit of an isolation period and just say, you know what, we're done with the Middle East, we're spending too much money there, it's not like we're really getting great deals on oil from them or taking over the oils after we get involved in the wars there, or we're getting some big benefit, let's just get out of there. How do you think that would affect how the relations would be between the countries in the Middle East and us and or our allies?
Well, I'm not sure we have any allies in the Middle East.
We have Israel.
I think that's a matter of opinion about whether they're a detriment or a benefit. I tend towards the former, but it's everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But generally speaking, we're stuck in the Middle East at the moment because of Saudi Arabia and oil and the Emirates and Kuwait. As long as the president sits on the pipeline, as long as he obstructs development offshore, as long as he gets in the way of fracking, we're not going to have much of a chance of getting out of the Middle East. We need to have the Saudis on our side, and so we'll have to die for them. We're kind of their blonde-haired, blue-eyed slaves. When they have an enemy, we go and fight it for them, whether it's Iraq or Syria or Iran.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you read the op-ed piece that Putin put out in the New York Times. And I got to tell you, it's just amazing that you would get the foreign president of the other superpower in the world actually contacting the Times directly to want to put out this piece so that everyone knowing, everyone gives credence to the New York Times. Everyone knows they're going to either read it or Google it online. So he knows that this is going to be read by tens of millions of people. And he puts out this op-ed piece talking about our involvement in Syria and what we should or shouldn't do, and really states his opinion. What's your take on Putin's piece in the New York Times?
Well, I think socialists hang together, so it's not unusual for the New York Times to have Putin's piece in it. But Putin is, whatever you think of Putin, he has played our president for a fool, and he's trying to get as much out of that as he can. And he also realizes that he's speaking to an American public that is definitely not in favor of going into any combat in Syria. There may be some little bit of backfire on this. It may make the Senate vote in favor of a military action if it ever comes to a vote. But Putin is just kind of, he's not really relevant to this discussion. We're in this discussion, we're in this problem because the president shot his mouth off and doesn't know how to get out of it except by bombing somebody. And that's kind of the bottom line.
Do you think that Obama spoke out of line? Because I think he did when, you have to either put up or shut up. I think he really played out of turn when he said there's a red line in the sand, and if you cross this red line, then we're going to strike militarily and we're going in. And that red line in the sand was the use of any weapons of mass destruction, which also included the use of chemical weapons. So once that was done, and Obama basically did nothing and backtracked from that point forward to get us to the point we are now, where he said, well, I wanted to act, but you know what? Let's take a vote on it in Congress. I mean, how do you think that reflected to the people fighting in Syria, particularly Assad, and to everyone else watching around the world?
Well, I think, of course, it showed a lack of determination and really kind of a floundering. What am I going to do here? Let me punt it over to the Congress and let them either vote for it or vote against it, and they can take the blame if they vote against it. I don't know what blame he thinks there would be. I think the American people will be relieved if there's no intervention in Syria. I don't understand this president's foreign policy. He pays attention to a lot of things that don't matter, and he pays no attention to the things that do matter.
He also seems to waver, and when I think someone wavers, particularly the person in charge of our entire armed forces, you can't waver. You got to show some resolve one way or the other, and you got to follow through on it. It's like the parent that's always threatening their kid, I'm going to punish you if you say this again, and then they don't once it happens. And I think it just really shows a lot of weakness. And I got to tell you, when I was watching Kerry speaking before Congress, what do you think of the fact that he also played such a strong hand, like he was all in, and then next thing we know, there's some backtrack, and he's saying, well, maybe we should see if we could try to recover those chemical weapons and see if we can go that route. Do you think that was just an off-turn remark that he made in passing, or do you think that's really what they were discussing behind closed doors, and he threw that in there to see what the reaction would be?
I just think everybody was trying to catch up with Putin. I don't think these guys were prepared for what Putin did. I think the president is really like a professor. You know, he doesn't have a good idea of where he wants to go, and he kind of seems to be influenced by the last person he talked to. And you know, one of the most powerful things in the world is silence. And I think
that's
truly,
absolutely true.
If the American president had been silent, and if he decided that Assad should be attacked, Assad should have been attacked with the consent of at least the majority leaders in Congress, without having said a word about it. But now we've danced this dance in public, and it really makes at least the president makes him look very silly.
Well, I think one thing that, to me, that I commented on before that I thought was just ridiculous is if you really think there's crimes against humanity going on somewhere, you step in and you try, if you're going to promote America as we are exceptional as a country and we will fight for freedom and democracy across the world, then you should mean that and you should support that and stand by that. And I just think the fact that 100,000 or more were killed by gunfire, bombs going off within the country, and Obama sat by and did nothing during that entire time instead of maybe taking a position to maybe one of the more moderate groups that was part of this so-called rebel fight against Assad's government, maybe it would have made an impact and a difference earlier on. But to sit by and just let 100,000 people die, and then when a chemical weapon is used and 1,600 die, oh, well, that's crossing the line. That just doesn't seem to make sense to me. Does that make any sense to you?
No, well, it doesn't make any sense to me for the United States to intervene anywhere where a U.S. interest is not at risk. I don't think there's anything particularly noble about going to war for the idea of trying to instill democracy or freedom in people who don't want it. The opposition to Assad is driven, at least militarily, by people who will kill us as soon as they're done killing Syria.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you're a historian, and you've studied this for decades. I mean, is there any way, other than just completely changing the culture over there, that we can really make a change or a dent in their philosophy or their way of thinking to get to some kind of unity or peaceful kind of coexistence with the countries in the Middle East? Is that even possible?
Yeah, I think it's possible if we stay home. If we finally decide that there's things in this world that A, we can't influence, and B, that we don't need to care about. Next to Americans, Arabs are generally the most isolationist people on earth. They don't want to be involved in anything except their own affairs. They're involved in a war with us because we're interfering in what they're up to in their own countries.
So let's suppose we did that. Let's take your hypothesis and take it a step further. So let's suppose we finally wake up and we say, let's get out, let's try to let them alone, and we'll do our own thing, and we actually leave. Now let's suppose Iran is going to get that bomb. Do we interfere, or we let them get the nukes?
We've interfered for a decade. They're going to get it. They'd be insane if they didn't try to get it. They've spent the last 30 years hearing every day from the Israelis or the Americans or NATO or Great Britain that we're going to go to war with them for one thing or another. We've invoked these sanctions, which are really acts of war. We've killed their scientists. We've done a bunch of things. You know, Iran is no threat to the United States. It's a third-rate military power that would be dished by our military if they got into a confrontation. The only real threat to the United States is the fact that we've been so derelict in border control and so politically correct regarding Muslims, and that we have allowed the Iranians and their Lebanese surrogate, Hezbollah, to establish a very strong terrorist infrastructure inside the United States. And if we attack Iran, or if Israel attacks Iran, or if we both attack Iran, the Iranians have an option of causing havoc in this country. But, of course, the politicians won't talk about that.
And on the eve of 9/11, after having seen what happened, we know that they're very capable of carrying out such threats because that was just horrific. Now, let me ask you a question, because you've been there right at the forefront of being able to take out bin Laden. Now, I've always wondered, like, you see what happened. We watched all these pictures. You see Hillary sitting in the room with the president, with the vice president. They all look very serious. I mean, Is their involvement just so minimal in all this, and that's just a great photo op, that it's basically people like you that were coordinating everything? You put the calls in, the boots to the ground are the ones that are making it happen, and it's just like we're ready to go, and basically all they're saying is yes or no. Is that really what it comes down to? But because it seems like they want to take all the credit for these operations, and I just don't see it.
Well, tragically, they are at the core of it. Because of our constitutional arrangements and because of the way lawyers control intelligence operations or military operations, the president is ultimately responsible and ultimately needs to make the decision. Obama had to go and kill bin Laden because Bill Clinton decided 10 times not to even try to do it.
Well, that was going to be why I'm asking this, because I know when you were in charge, you yourself, in charge of this whole bin Laden operation, tell me about like how it goes down. You had him under your scope. He was there. The calls made, and what, Clinton just punted and didn't want to do it? Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, every time we had him, I don't think it's unique to me, and I have to say I was very fortunate. Bin Laden, when I was running operations against him, was still learning his security drill. He was not as conscious of security as he is now. So we had 2 chances to kidnap him, and we had 8 chances to kill him with the U.S. military. And in every option, it had to go to the president, and the president decided no on every occasion. Once because he was afraid the Muslim world would get mad at him. Another time because if we killed bin Laden, we would have killed one of the princes from the United Arab Emirates who was visiting bin Laden. And we were about to sell $8 billion worth of F-16s to the prince's dad. So they decided that the F-16s were more important than American lives. So
unbelievable.
When you see those
now, what
pictures,
about Bush? Didn't the same thing happen on the Bush? He had him in his scope one time, and it could have been done, and it was also passed on?
I'm not sure if it was the president that time because that was a different situation. He had bin Laden in some mountains in eastern Afghanistan. And as I understand it, the generals decided not to use American troops because they were afraid of casualties. And so they hired a couple of Afghan commanders to go after bin Laden, and both of them had fought alongside of bin Laden against the Soviets. So, of course, they were a day late and a dollar short. They never got him, and bin Laden lived another decade.
Well, we've been living through decades of presidents that really seem to be bungling, particularly in foreign affairs. Domestic policy, a whole other matter we could talk about for hours, I'm sure. But let me ask you this. Over the past several decades, we've seen Jimmy Carter, we've seen Reagan, we've seen Bush Sr., Clinton, Bush Jr., and now Obama. Which of these presidents do you really think we were really the most in danger under, and which one do you think made us the safest, and why?
I think Clinton and Obama are very bad in the current sense. I think George Bush, the second George Bush, was a decent man who surrounded himself with terrible advisors. I think Ronald Reagan was the best, but he only had one enemy. He had the Soviet Union. The slate of enemies that we have cultivated over the last decade have been, they're very numerous. And I would also say we have, with each presidency, people that are less and less inclined to kill our enemies. And, you know, people are people. We're the same people that were alive, at least in our characteristics, when Caesar was here. And if we don't kill the enemy will kill us. And the problem for the United States is our presidents are so reluctant to use the force that we've paid for that they tend to try to protect us by things like the NSA program, which is shredding the Fourth Amendment, and doing other things that really have a negative effect on American civil liberties and don't really have any effect on the enemy.
Absolutely. I got to cut it short there. Michael, I got to have you back when we extend to an hour, which is going to happen soon because we literally have 1 minute left. Everybody, please go to Michael's site and check it out. Michael Scheuer, nonintervention.com. Check it out. There's a lot of good reading materials out there. Hear both sides. It's very important to get yourself educated. Michael, you've been tremendous. I want to have you back. I got literally hundreds of questions to ask you. We can go for hours. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Remember, please go to our site, www.attorneyadamthompson.com. Post your questions there. Next week, we're going to have Judge Larry Sheldon on. You'll remember him. He was the judge that presided over the Anna Nicole Smith case. Till next time, everybody, remember, be part of the conversation and always think outside the box.